Eimer Ní Mhaoldomhnaigh, the costume designer for Foundation on Apple TV Plus, a complex saga of humans scattered on planets throughout the galaxy, all living under the rule of the Galactic Empire, is the brief synopsis, but it's a massive show, massive in scale and scope, based on the Isaac Asimov novel. I guess, Eimer, I wanted to start there. This, I've seen people describe this as maybe almost a possibly unfilmable book. Obviously, we know that that's not true because you made the show. But I mean, when you were approached for this, where do you first start thinking about the costumes for this?
Well, I did episodes 2 to 10. So, I started working at the same time as Kurt and Bart, who did episode 1. So we kind of worked together. And, it was, I suppose for me, I normally work on period films or more contemporary films, but a lot of period work. So I really kind of relished the challenge of doing something different. I mean, it's kind of interesting when you hear other costume designers talk. I sometimes feel we all kind of say the same thing over and over, but it is true. You are always looking for a challenge. And, Foundation is just, it is, to use a much worn, turn of phrase, it is epic on every kind of scale. So I just kind of decided, the best kind of way to approach it is just the way I do all my work. Just, read the script and just try, I think everything really needs to be kind of character based. That's always really important for me, that the costumes are relevant to the character and what the character is doing and where the character is. And even if that's an imagined world, you still have to bring the characterization into the costume so that when people, see whoever it is, if it's Lee Pace or Clark Peters, that they can relate to this person and the costume is giving you some information about that character. So really it's just kind of, I kept my normal kind of working methods and just tried to apply it to a very exciting world, which was going to give me a lot of opportunities to be extra creative, I think.
Yeah, for sure. I was reading one of the reviews I saw compared to like the costumes to like something you would see at like the Met Gala or so, like they're so like it's like very creative fashion and stuff. You mentioned like you had done like period pieces and more contemporary things. And when you're costume designing for something that's set in a future that's even hard to comprehend, I mean, how do you how do you think about how fashion and costumes will evolve in future, I guess? Like, how does that play into it?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose what the thing about Foundation, it is science fiction, it's futuristic, whatever you want to call it. It's not the worlds aren't peopled by robots. Now, taking Demerzel out of that equation, but I mean, most of the character, even Demerzel has a very, is a very surprising robot. She has very human feelings and emotions, and we kind of really identify with her. But it's not like R2-D2 or, kind of people kind of walking around like that or creating creatures. So I really felt, there was this, because it has that human element to it, that once that is there, you're really kind of talking about, like something like Terminus, when they go on the slow ship and they arrive on Terminus, and that's, it's this very barren landscape. So you're immediately thinking about clothing that has to be practical and durable. And, I'm always trying to kind of think as well, how is the audience going to relate to the story and to the characters, and how do the characters become believable? So the world that the Cleons inhabit, Trantor, is very, that is kind of your very futuristic world. It's very high tech. It's kind of what we imagine, be it right or wrong, the future might be. But then, with something like Terminus, it's a bit more like kind of a Mad Max kind of type of a world. There's a struggle to find water. There's a struggle to find power. It's people repurposing and, just kind of trying to be, it's very relatable to kind of what's happening now in the world, with people much more interested in the environment and, repurposing everything and giving everything a new life. So again, it's about the script and the story that is all the time playing into the costumes and how the costumes are created.
Right. No, that makes a lot of sense. You mentioned like I was looking at your CV. You've worked on so many adaptations, or like a lot of different ones, and like you said, like more maybe period pieces. But and this is obviously an adaptation as well. When you're like as a costume designer, do you go back and like read the book and see how like what the descriptions of characters' clothing is like? How do you go about for an adaptation like this, or in general? I guess I was just curious about that.
Yeah, well, that is. It's definitely the thing you imagine that you should do. And of course, it is the thing I immediately did, because when I told my husband, he was like, "Oh my God, Isaac Asimov." And I was going, "Oh my God, who is he?" He was like, "Oh my God, he's amazing." So it seemed that all my male friends knew who Isaac Asimov and Foundation was. And I was really slightly deeply embarrassed, if you can say slightly and deeply embarrassed all at the one time. But I immediately downloaded it onto my Kindle and started reading it. And then I was on a Zoom call with David Goyer, and he said, "Don't read it. The scripts are going to be different. You're just going to get confused." And I said, "Oh my God, he knows me so well already. I'm going to start getting confused. Who's doing what, when, what episode are we on?" So yeah, I did read the first book. And then, like in the original book, the lead character is male. There's so many different things, so as they say, I parked the books. I walked away from the books. And I said, I just need to get to know the scripts, Maybe I should read the books now.
Maybe, yeah. Why now that it's almost done. Can you mentioned like Lee Pace and stuff. I think the brothers and the way their costumes look is so. I just love that. I love how they look in their chambers or whatever, and then like obviously out in public, there's like they have like a different view and a different like look and presentation, I guess would maybe be the word. Can you talk about like working on that, like making how you kind of like honed in on like how they would look in public versus private, I guess.
Yeah, well, as I was saying, like, Kurt and Bart did episode 1, right. So that the costume that I did for the Cleons, really kind of starts in episode 2. So I suppose the main ones are for Terrence Mann's character as Dusk. So when he dies, the Ascension robes. And they're really, if you look at those, they are very much kind of based on sort of religious iconography. So this whole idea of the Cleons as being almost, a religious cult, that people kind of having to obey them, people saying whatever the Cleons say is right, a little bit like Catholicism and the Pope, those kind of references. And then, with the when we go to the Maiden and Lee Pace's character Day, and he decides he has to walk the spiral, so the clothes. That is very. I'm not obsessing about. I'm not some crazy religious fanatic, but that is quite biblical too, as it happens. But we wanted that to be just the simplest costume that it could be, because we have become so used to seeing the Cleons in pomp and splendor, looking very regal, looking extremely powerful. So that by the time, they go to the Maiden, we just wanted to strip everything back. And so that that Day, by the time he gets to the end of the spiral, he is, when he gets into the water, he is naked, but he has been totally pared down in every sense of the word. His costume, it starts out as something that can cover him. He loses that. He's in a loincloth. It ends up being dirty and tatters. And so it's really, again, it's that whole, what is, it's the characterization. Where is the character going? What is happening to the character? What's going through his head? That's, so he just ends up in this terribly simple costume, which completely contrasts to everything that he is and wears when he is on Trantor.
Right.
And it's very symbolic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you mentioned, like, just briefly before we wrap up, you mentioned like the religious iconography and stuff. Was that something like you, and how you're like, you joke, you're not like a religious fanatic, but I'm like, is that something that you kind of just were like, did you kind of not stumble into that, but was that like surprising that you ended up doing, like, it was like maybe repeating itself, or that you were noticing that as a connective tissue?
Yeah, I mean, I wanted, so for Dusk, for the Ascension Chamber, and when he dies, I wanted it to kind of take on this very ceremonial kind of a role to it, and I just kind of kept going back to that sort of the Vatican, and like when you think like the robes that they wear in the Vatican, I mean, you can look at paintings from hundreds of years ago, they really haven't changed very much, and I just thought it would be really interesting to kind of carry that into the future and kind of have a sort of a slightly futuristic sci-fi kind of feel to it, and that we all will. When I say we all go into the future, we'll all be dead. But when we do, things just aren't all going to change. We're going to still, hopefully, I hope we're going to still keep on to some of our whatever we have from the 20th century. It's all still going to be there, and I just wanted to kind of show some of those tropes are still going to exist, but in a futuristic fashion. Right.
Eimer Ní Mhaoldomhnaigh, costume designer for Foundation on Apple TV Plus right now. Thank you so much.
Thank you.